Some of you might recall an older film that was entitled There's Something About Mary. Well, we are also going to talk about something about Mary, but in this respect, we're going to be talking about the Virgin Mary. Now, we started off addressing the Virgin Mary in an earlier discussion, but in order to do a more comprehensive exegesis, we are going to start over with this discussion. And we are going to address some other things about Mary outside of her being understood as the Virgin Mary. And so we're going to look at this overarching dynamic with respect to Mary before we then delve back into this dynamic of parthenogenesis with respect to Mary and this virgin birth. And so this overarching issue is glaring, but many individuals are not addressing what is right in front of our faces with respect to this entity known as Mary. When you review these narratives related to Mary, you will often see that there are variations with respect to spelling. And so sometimes you will see Mary being offered as Mariam or Miriam. It's also noteworthy that when you look at this spelling of Mariam and you break it down in terms of syllables, you have something that interestingly looks like Mar I am. So what we're going to be doing is addressing this name, Mary, this name, Mariam, and why it is so important in this construct of Mary. Because what you see when you start to break down the name of Mary and you look at the context of this entire dynamic, you see that Mary is presented as not simply a virgin mother, but she is presented as the Virgin Queen Mother. And so she has a number of identities, and we're going to examine the meaning of some of these identities because they are very crucial to understanding who Mary is presented as being. Just by looking at the word Mary, you can see that it is synonymous with MOR in terms of etymology. And if you recall, MOR, as with Mary, is related to myrrh, this idea of being bitter, but it is also tied to this idea of being the head, being lofty, being high, and being exalted. And so you see these variations in terms of spellings, but you have the same root going on there. Now, what's of course interesting is that when you flip those words around, um, what you have is that RAM or ROM, RUM, and you basically have the same thing. And so in reverse, Mar or more basically means high or exalted. And you see this here with Ram and this idea of Ram. In some other traditions, some other languages, it's translating to this idea of high and exalted and lofty. The same thing with room, meaning to be high. And so Mary is presented by her name as an entity that is lofty, that is high, that is exalted. And in Strong's Concordance, you will find a number of deconstructions with respect to this idea of room or Ram or Rome. You even see this as a part of Abram's name, or some people refer to him as Abraham. But his name, Ram or Avram, is essentially exalted father. And so this idea of exaltation is running throughout Scripture with respect to a number of individuals who have been elevated. And so Mary is no exception. Her name, in essence, is exalted or high. And so you also see this idea of exalted or high or rise with respect to the Creator. And so you see that whether you are using Rom or Room or Rome. There's that idea of being high or exalted. You also see this with respect to the name of the creator in Arabic. And so you still see this idea of high or exalted or rise. And so this is what we have here with respect to Mary, with respect to this idea of Mar or this word more. And so, in essence, many might offer that the construct of the creator is this word more, which also, of course, translates into this idea of big or greatness. Many people see Mary as associated with Rome with respect to religion and with respect to this veneration that goes on related to Mary. However, Mary's name, in essence, is the same as Rome. And you can see here this illustration of how when you flip these words around, you have the same construct. So the ROM is the same as Rome. We're going to look at what Rome means so that you can see this very clearly. And then when you flip that ROM, Rome, around, you have more, MOR. When you do room, RUM, you flip that around, you have MUR. You have ROM, which definitely is related to head, and you have the RAM. When you flip that around, you have MAR. And when you look at constructs such as Morian, there is a related idea which is related to Marian or Marian. And so all of these things are related, even if they appear distinct on the surface. And so when you are talking about Moorish anything, you are talking about Romish. And so it really is the same thing. And so Mary, in essence, is another way of saying more. Marian is another way of saying Morian. And so all of these constructs hang together. It's very interesting that they are sort of the flip sides of each other, but that is what we have. It's unclear if that was originally by design or if it just evolved this way. It's a very interesting dynamic. But when you look at this, you can see that Mary is synonymous with Rome, not simply because they are venerating her in Rome, but this is the essence of her name. And so I want you to look closely at this. And remember, when you look at scripture, you will sometimes see references to hills. There are some famous hills, these 7 hills, that appear to be related to Rome. Now, Rome, when you look at the etymology here, you see that again, Rome is associated with this idea of height or point or upper, and the idea of hill. And so Rome, again, is associated with, in terms of origin, this idea of elevation. And so when you are looking at this idea of Mary, this virgin queen, it starts to make sense that she's understood as the virgin queen because that is her actual name. And so she is the exalted virgin, the high virgin, the chief virgin, the crown virgin. She is the more virgin. And so she is considered the head. She is what is known as Regina. And so, by virtue of her name, her identity is not only the Virgin Mother, her identity is the Queen Mother. And what's also noteworthy is that mother and more sometimes translate as the same word. So it's the same construct depending on what language you are looking at. And so we're going to go forward with now addressing this issue of parthenogenesis with respect to Mary. Understanding now that the presentation of Mary is not one as simply a virgin mother, but as someone who is presented by virtue of her name as one who is considered exalted, one who is considered royal, one who is considered regal, one who is considered overarching.